analyst Javed Rana joins us now to discuss the latest developments from Lebanon. Good afternoon, Javed. Thanks for joining us on the program. Now, the Israeli Defense Forces have released a statement saying that Hizbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah has been killed. If the Israeli reports are true, how will this assassination by the Israeli airstrikes impact Hezbollah's internal power dynamics and operational capabilities?
I think to begin with, we have to admit the bitter fact is that the Israeli deeply penetrated within the ranks and files of Hezbollah. And that is a reason that we have seen over the course of last couple of days, last couple of weeks, that their pages were targeted and then their walkie-talkies were blown up. And that was the beginning of a bigger operation that the apartheid state of Israel was planning to launch. And now we have seen that it has boiled down to the one point, and that is what looks like an assassination of Hassan Nasrallah. He was an ideologue, and I think with his assassination, it doesn't mean the war is all over. Now, the kind of the rhetoric we are hearing from Tel Aviv, that indicates that they are saying now, the Israeli military is saying that they would go after any threat, any perceived threat. Now, this is a very dangerous mindset. And by assassinating Hassan Nasrallah, it doesn't mean that the Palestinian cause would be over. Israel has been fighting against this low insurgency and then these insurgent attacks right from 1948 to onwards. It has not ended. It has changed in different shapes. They thought that the Fatah, if they contain Fatah and if they give them some kind of semi-autonomy, then these threats would be over. That has not happened. And I think now, what would be the shape of the events which are going to happen in the Middle East? That is extremely important. What are the options with Iran? What are the options with the second-tier leadership of Hassan Nasrallah? These are the clear-cut scenario which is building up. What so far apartheid state has used, they have used the same old method of awe and shock, something Americans and NATO did in Afghanistan, and they created an impression, they created optics that they are very much there and there is a military victory in Afghanistan. We have seen that after 20 years, the NATO had to withdraw from Afghanistan in a very disgraceful manner. Now, Israel has not learned lesson from the Americans' disgraceful withdrawal in Afghanistan. They have not learned lesson from what happened with the Americans in Iraq. And by the way, they have not learned lesson even from their own history. And their own history was that they attacked Lebanon repeatedly. They occupied 18 years in the southern parts of Lebanon. The insurgency did not end. They basically all Israel have been trying to do is they've been running after all these Palestinian groups, all those groups, militant groups. I call them freedom fighter groups, who have been fighting against the illegal, brutal occupation of Israel. Israel is not understanding this. More and more territories it occupies, more and more brutalities it has been committing on Palestinians. There will be more and more resistance. It will keep on changing its shape. Hassan Nasrallah was an ideologue. And Hezbollah is an organization which is based on an ideology, which is a Shia Islam. So he would be replaced by somebody else. Agenda would be the same. Tactics would undergo certain changes. Right now, as we speak, Hezbollah is under extreme stress. But that doesn't mean it is going to give in. It will retaliate. Now, the retaliation shape is going to be from Iraq. There will be retaliation from Iraq. There will be insurgent attacks, probably on the American installations in the Middle East. There would be insurgent attacks on Israel from Iraq, from Syria, from Yemen. and from Lebanon, from Hezbollah. It is a simply matter of time. To begin with, let me say that the Hezbollah also set up some kind of tunnels in the mountain region of this southern Lebanon, and probably also elsewhere along with the border of Syria. They would operate, and Israel would constantly remain under attack. Now, so-called this objective of Israel that it wants to send back 60,000 Israeli citizens who had to be displaced because of Hezbollah's attacks in the northern occupied territories of the Palestine, which is known as Israel now. The point is, this is complete nonsense. These attacks will keep on happening. But their danger right now is that this insurgency may be disfranchised for the time being. Now, let's look at the bigger picture. And the bigger picture is Iran. Iran so far has not retaliated to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated in Tehran. Despite the fact that Iran came out with a lot of aggressive statements that it will take a revenge. Now, reason being, it seems that Iran knows now that what is the mindset of Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu. He wants to expand this war. Partly, it would give him a more political lease of life domestically, because he would face inquiry as to how there was intelligence failure when October 7th military operation by Hamas happened in the occupied Palestinian territory, Israel. So in that context, that is just a part of it. But the bigger picture is the fascist, extremist, theological, misleading religious agenda of Prime Minister Netanyahu, his far right, and he himself belongs to, as a matter of fact, far right. He's not a secular. Because he has been, citing these biblical references, giving biblical references, justifying the killing of children, Palestinians and elsewhere. So that is a part and parcel of their agenda. They believe that since 3,000 years long ago, 3,000 years ago, they had some kind of government in the Middle East, and they want to have a replica of it. And they are declaring everybody else as a terrorist, as an extremist, along with the West. But as a matter of fact, the biggest terrorist in the world is Israel and its Western allies who are partner in this crime. They have killed 40,000 people in occupied Palestine. They are killing a large number of people, thousands in the Lebanon, and every next day they see they have a perceived threat. This is a complete nonsense. These are preventive so-called strikes which failed elsewhere when the Americans tried to do it, and they would fail again in Lebanon and elsewhere. My understanding of the situation is that if Hassan Nasrallah is assassinated indeed, which looks like is the case, because so far we have not heard a second statement from Hezbollah, because Hezbollah initially said that he's alive. But had he been alive, there could have been a second statement from him. Maybe his voice could have been heard. It looks like that he has been assassinated. I think over the period of time, Iran built up a great network of insurgency across the region. I remember one of the statements of Iranian general back in 2016. He said that Iran has trained 300,000 militants. Let me repeat it, 300,000 militants in Yemen, in Iraq, in Syria, in Pakistan, in Afghanistan. That means mostly these are the Shia militants. And whenever there is a bigger war in the region, they would certainly sneak into Syria, they would sneak into Iraq, they would sneak into Lebanon, and maybe at one point of time, they would sneak into the occupied Palestinian territories. It is what Israel has been doing, it is creating more and more enemies by occupying more and more territories, by creating, the reason being is quite simple, because whosoever it thinks that it could attack Israel, Israel straight away retaliate. So in a broader picture, I think the days of peace in the Middle East seems to be numbered. The reason Iran is not retaliating right now, or it has not retaliated to the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, probably it is at the edge of making a nuclear bomb. And that is why it seems it is exercising some kind of patience, because Israel is looking for an opportunity, a justification where it can hit straight away Iranian nuclear installations. I think that looks like a reason that Iran does not want to open up these battlegrounds at a larger scale. I don't think Iran would retaliate directly, but certainly these militant groups in Yemen, Iraq, and in Syria and elsewhere would retaliate. American installations, American interest would also come under attack, possibly, if it is indeed true that Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated.
Now, Javed, you spoke about, earlier in the piece, you spoke about the tactic that was used in Afghanistan, the shock and awe tactic. Do you think in this case, Israel is, at the moment, it looks like Israel is wanting to continue to carry out strikes in the area, and they don't seem to be discriminating in terms of which territory they're going to target, because they, as you always talk about, you know, their bigger plan and to take back historically what was theirs according to their narrative. Can Israel paralyze the will of the Lebanese to retaliate? And after that, can they paralyze the will of Iran? Can the shock and awe tactic work here?
Certainly not. All these shock and awe tactics would not work. It works for the time being. In the short run, it has worked in case of Lebanon only for days, and it may work for a few days more. It would not go beyond that. I think the Hizbollah would regroup, would reorganize. They have their assets, the military assets, their manpower scattered across Lebanon, across the region, in Syria, in Iraq, and also they have their allies in Yemen. So I think in days to come, they would retaliate. And you may recall that Iran has already facilitated, or maybe facilitating, a deal between Russia and Yemeni militant groups, Houthis, who are the de facto government there. And under this deal, Yemen is going to import some very latest anti-ship missiles. Probably these are the P-800. These are the latest missiles which Russia has manufactured. And if Yemen gets hold of, if Houthi gets hold of these weapons, that will be a recipe for disaster, not only for the Israel, but also for all the US-led Western allies, because there will be more precise attack in the Red Sea, and there could also be more precise attack on the warships who are stationed in the Mediterranean Sea and elsewhere in the Middle East. These are the American I'm talking about. These are American warships which are there to back up Israel plan in case there is a direct war conflict between Iran and Israel. Then certainly USA would jump into this war. So I think that it has been a very long-held desire of Israel, and they've been working over the period of time to create a very chaotic condition in the region where Israel can justify an attack on Iran, and then it can bring along with it Americans. So I think as we speak, the situation is in the Middle East is completely on the edge. It doesn't mean that there will be immediate retaliation, but I think there would be retaliation, the shape of which is going to be different. They have they have not so far used the arsenals, the latest arsenals, which are undetectable. I'm talking about the surface-to-surface missiles and other military assets they can use against Israel. And that means Netanyahu was talking about the repatriating 60,000 people back to the northern Israel. I think in this there is a kind of scenario which is building up, which suggests that probably there will be more people inside Israel who will be displaced because of fear of more and more attacks, even if there are unfrequented attacks on the occupied territories in Palestine, the apartheid state Israel. That means the economy of Israel would be in shambles despite all kind of foreign aid. So I think more and more people would leave Israel. They wanted to build up a Jewish state which will be peaceful, and now for the Jewish, the most insecure state in the world, it is the Israel. And the credit does go to the Prime Minister Netanyahu, who right from the day one, for decades, he has been pleading only one case, creating a kind of a situation, building their Arab allies to make it sure that there is no two-state solution. And
Okay.
I think that is the recipe for disaster.
All right, let's talk about the likelihood of what we could potentially see in the upcoming days. What strategic calculation is Israel making at this point, considering the potential for a wider regional conflict that could involve Hizbollah's arsenal of 150,000 rockets and Iran's backing?
Well, of course, Iran is minutely monitoring this situation. They are directly in touch with their military assets, the insurgents groups in the Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq. I think there will be more rocket attacks onto Israel. There will be more sophisticated missiles attacks, maybe surface-to-surface missiles attack. And those attacks may be more precise, and there may be civilian casualties inside Israel in days to come. And apart from that, because of the limitations of the weapons that these insurgents groups have, there is also possibility that these attacks would also be onto the American interest, onto the Western allies' interest across the Middle East. So I think there will be a kind of a measured chaos will be there. Iran would not like to blow it up to the point where Israel or the Americans directly hit Iran, because Iran has been operating through these insurgents groups, and it will intensify its war through these insurgents groups in days and weeks to come. Tactics would change, but this war, these threats is not going to fade away. And these threats have been created. I have to say it again. These threats to the security of Israel have been created none other than by the fascist regime in Tel Aviv right now and their predecessors.
Now, Javed, with the recent killing of Mohammed Ali Ismail, Hezbollah's missile commander, and other top operatives, do you foresee Hezbollah retaliating with significant military force, or do we expect a more measured response considering Lebanon's fragile state?
I think since Lebanon is a very divided society on religious, political, ethnic, and sectarian grounds, I think that was probably the key reason Israel managed to penetrate within the ranks and files of Hezbollah. And they had their espionage network to the extent that they had their intelligence network deep inside their telecom network, and deep inside within the political parties, within the social fabric. I think nonetheless, there is also growing pro-Palestinian sentiments in Lebanon. It's a very small country. It's around 4 to 5 million populated country. It's in a bad economic shape. There is an interim government there which cannot take any decisive decision in so far as the foreign policy is concerned. So that is why we have seen that these proxies like Hizbollah, they are dominating on the political landscape of Lebanon, and they are practically the the ruling government there because they are operating independently. But I think with the possible assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, which seems to be the case, there would be, I think they may not announce the leadership immediately, or if they announce that, they will go into hiding. They will operate, they will retaliate. These attacks could be more sophisticated. That is one option. But the low insurgent attacks have already been there. There have been these rocket attacks onto the northern part of Israel. That has already been going on. But I think the kind of the matching response that probably you are looking for, will that be there? I can't say that, but immediately it may not be there. But certainly in days to come, when Hezbollah reorganizes itself, when Iran will have a more clear policy measures in what manner they are going to handle this situation, because certainly Iran has been backing up all these militant groups. Israel certainly has been propagating since day one that Iran is the biggest problem. But I think the biggest problem is not Iran, it's Israel itself. Iran has been supporting Palestinian jihadi groups. Hezbollah has been supporting Palestinian jihadi group. And then Yemeni Houthis have been supporting the Palestinian jihadi group because they are under the occupation. So as long as this occupation stays there, these kind of insurgent attacks will keep on happening, no matter in what shape, in what manner, at what time.
Now, you mentioned earlier in your answer that Lebanon was a divided society. We know there's it's populated heavily with Christians as well as Muslims. Now, do you think that it was easy for Israel to infiltrate in that situation? Do you think that internally the divisions in Lebanon are making it easier for Israel? Could there be factions, in Lebanon? Could there be factions in Lebanon actually supporting Israel in terms of this warfare?
Certainly, there are groups inside Lebanon who staunchly are opposed to Hezbollah because they believe that Hezbollah has taken over Lebanon and they don't want to fight with Israel. But at the same time, we have to see a bigger picture. Bigger picture is that along with Christians, a Sunni population, Shia population, they are all supporting a Palestinian cause. But then there are also wheels within wheels within the Sunni groups. I think there are probably people who might be, I'm not sure, who might have some kind of linkages with Israel, because Israel seems to be deeply, deeply penetrated within the Lebanese society. You may recall in early 1982s when Israel attacked, there was a similar situation, attacked the Lebanon, and they installed a Christian president. And within a very short span of time, the Christian president was assassinated because people in Lebanon simply, by and large, let's forget about the Christian population. I'm sure there will be a significant number among the Christian population who would also be supporting the Palestinian cause. But I think but nonetheless, the Christian president was assassinated in early 80s. The reason being was quite simple, that the people in Lebanon would not like to see anybody who is perceived to be a Western extension in Lebanon, who is perceived to be Israel's extension in Lebanon. Israel can effectively operate behind the scene, but it cannot create a situation where it occupies parts of the territories and then install a government of its choice. This is most unlikely scenario. That would be basically meaning that the Israel and the Western allies would be reinforcing their failures on Lebanon. But they have, created a kind of a situation in Lebanon which is pathetic. People are fed up with this kind of war. They don't want to have a war. But at the same time, the bigger problem again and again is that is the occupation. That is the apartheid structure that Israel has built up inside Palestinians. Thousands of people are still in jail. They are being tortured in Palestine, in the occupied Palestinian territories. And they are getting no relief. the kind of the apartheid structure that exists inside Palestine, the people have to look for a struggle to secure an independent state. The bigger trouble is if you talk to the Palestinians, when people ask that it was perhaps a mistake on the part of Hamas to carry out such a major attack on October 7 last year, and that led to such a big reaction from Israel, and Israel resorted to this genocide. They are saying that we were already dead. Israel was attacking them every next day, and our life was pathetic. So it is better to die with their self-respect than to stay subservient to the apartheid structure that Israel has built over the years in the occupied Palestine.
Now, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned that the war in Lebanon could draw in external powers, given the current climate. Do you foresee any specific international actors stepping into the conflict, either diplomatically or militarily? And if so, who and why?
By external actors, obviously it means it's Iran. By external actors, obviously it means it is the US, led by the France, and then the Britain and other Western allies. They can obviously, in case of a direct conflict between Israel and Iran, they can jump into this war, and then that is a possible scenario. And I think that is what probably the UN Secretary General was indicating, and that was his apprehension, because we have already seen that the US warships are already there in the Middle Mediterranean Sea, in the Arabian Sea. So in that context, I think it would be, this apprehension makes a lot of sense. And that is what we have been discussing about. And that is what basically Prime Minister Netanyahu has been struggling hard over the course of decades to create a kind of a chaotic conditions in the Middle East where it can attack Iran, where USA can be involved. Backed by the USA, it can attack Iran and destroy the Iranian nuclear installations. Because the only threat that right now Israel feels is that these are the possible nuclearization of Iran. If that happens, that would be certainly a recipe for disaster for Israel.
Okay, now lastly, Javed, Israel claims that Nasrallah's death is a significant victory in its broader campaign against regional forces. Do you think this is part of a broader Israeli strategy to dismantle both Hamas and Hezbollah's operational capacity, or is this more reactionary given recent events?
I think, again, we have to learn a lesson from the history, and Israel is not learning lesson from the history. Israel has assassinated dozens of Palestinian leaders, whether they belong to Hamas, they belong to Fatah group, they belong to other jihadi groups. Did they end the resistance against Israel? That did not happen. It would never happen, because at one point of time, Israel, particularly in late 80s, Israel was very confident that when the Hamas emerged, they thought with the emergence of Hamas, Fatah would be countered, because they will pick up fight against each other, and then Palestinian resistance group would be weakened, and that is where the survival of Israel be there. So these kind of nonsensical calculations that Israel made, those calculations failed and backfired. Now, what they have done, they have assassinated, before Hassan Nasrallah, many top commanders of Hizbollah. Did they end the resistance from Hezbollah? No, it did not. They assassinated Ismail Haniyeh, the Hamas political chief. Did that end the resistance from the Palestinian groups? Did that end the rocket attacks from Gaza into the other occupied Palestinian territories, Israel? It did not. It would, and these are the kind of dream scenarios which Israel has been building up. It has created unintentionally, out of foolishness, insecurity infrastructure around the apartheid state. And that is a sense of fear. Why does it fear? The reason being is that someone who's a thief, someone who's a robber, someone who has committed a crime, he knows that it will be caught one day. So what it is trying to do, it is trying to eliminate all the legitimate sources against whom it had operated. So in this case, since Palestinian peoples were they were expelled from their homes were destroyed. Hundreds of the villages were straight away, they were massacred by Israel. Now the generation of those people, those Palestinian people, are now battling against Israel. And they have now conducted a genocide in Gaza. 41,000 people have been killed. It means how many survivors? Their survivors are in hundreds of thousands. They will grow up. They will fight back. And this battleground will continue. Mm-hmm. This battle will continue.
Okay, Javed, thank you so much for your time. We always appreciate your insight. Thank you for your contribution. Now, in a land
the growing tide of anti-Israel sentiments. What you see behind me is just tip of the iceberg of what is happening in the country. More than half of $52 billion black CIA budget is spent on espionage network in Pakistan. How would you handle it?
The US has looked upon Pakistan as an ally at one point and then as an enemy at the same time.
That is going to be the first legal reason on the basis of which he is going to be instantly ousted by the Supreme Court of Pakistan.
Joining us live, Javed Rana, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues.
In the world politics, which is not being driven by any moral principle, it is being driven by the hard geostrategic realities. In a broader picture, more countries would aspire to have nuclear weapons.